In my last video, I set out to see if Pathfinder 2nd Edition contained enough character options to give every single person in the world at least one unique character. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend going and checking that out before watching this, because I ended that video by finding a total of 67 billion possible character combinations. But that number is wrong. It is way too low. Even so, in my first video I go over a lot of foundational things about what I'm doing and how that I'll only be building on here. But today, we're going over your comments and corrections, as well as a few additions I found as well. To start off, 3 quick questions that I got from people that I can quickly address. First, I had a couple people asking me, but what about the spell choices? The answer as to why I didn't answer that is twofold. One is that the numbers already get so ridiculously big from adding in ability scores that I just don't see the need to. And 2, I need to control the scope of this project however I can. As you'll see in this video, the more material I include and keep track of, the harder this all gets. And I need to make sure that I can still make these videos while still preserving my sanity. The next question follows a similar theme. You could also add the half-elf and half-orc heritages to anyone. Well, sort of. This comes from an optional rule that Paizo put in the sidebar on page 55 of the core rulebook. The keyword is optional. This is not a part of the standard rules, and is completely up to GM discretion. Similar to the spells, another way I'm controlling the scope of this project is that I am not including any sort of optional rules, in order to show the combinations that the base system offers alone that anyone can access. And finally, a request. Do one of these videos for 5e. While it is an intriguing idea, I admittedly have much less experience in 5e, and what that little experience has taught me is that the Warlocks of the Waves are much more nebulous and draconian than Paizo is around what they allow people to do with their copyright. If people can give me a much better grasp on what little the seaside sorcerers allow, then I'd feel more confident about borrowing the player handbook from a friend and seeing what I can do with it. Until then, I'm happy sticking to Pathfinder, and it's time to see how our numbers are going to drastically change from the last video. To start things off, we have our base number, where the only character decisions we've made so far was ancestry, heritage, background class, and subclass, and we arrived at 104,000. Thankfully, this number is fine. The math at this point was pretty simple, and the character choices to make were also pretty cut and dry. You can also see our old friend the country counter up there at 34. This is going to be the last time you see the country counter, as the numbers are going to get so wild, it will very quickly become unhelpful. Alright, let's start with the easy one. This is our class table when we're starting to add in first level class feats, and I missed that the druid also gets an animal companion if they choose the animal subclass or order. Pretty simple, we throw an 8 in there, add everything back up, and now that one is solved. Fantastic! Up next is our base table is getting a new row for the human feat natural ambition, which says you were raised to be ambitious and always reach for the stars, leading you to progress very quickly in your chosen field. You gain a first level class feat of your choice. Now things are going to start to get a little more interesting. So we open the class table back up and we have to replace the entire first level feat column with these. What is that notation? This is one of the ways that mathematically you can notate the fact that we have a certain number of choices to make and a certain number of things you are choosing from. For example, with the Alchemist, we have 4 feats to choose from and we want to choose 2 of them. You would read that as 4 choose 2. The reason why this is important is because in this part of mathematics, there are 2 major types at play, permutations and combinations, and they result in very different answers. This one is combinations, and we want that one because order doesn't matter to us. We only care about what set of feats you end up with at the end, not what order you chose them in. Unfortunately, notice that I didn't change the Ranger row yet, because the Ranger has an additional wrinkle to it. I can't just say 5 choose 2 and be done with it, since one of those 5 choices results in choosing between 8 animal companions. The solution is to figure out how many of the resulting combinations would contain the animal companion feat, separate those out, do the necessary multiplication, then add them back in with the rest of the combinations. There's what that ends up looking like with 4 of the combinations containing animal companion. Great, now we can simplify everything, multiply and add across the rows, and this is what our class table looks like if you're a human who picks up the natural ambition feat. This gives us a new total of 4.5 million, but we're going to be moving on from this table very quickly because humans are terrifyingly gonna human, and things are going to get complicated enough that I just need to throw this table away and make a new one in order to keep things visually simpler. So, there we go. And now let's talk about a few things that we're going to need to keep in mind that I missed. One is that rogues get a skill feat for free, so no matter what, all rogues are going to get a very noticeable multiplier. 2, humans have the general training feat, giving them also a huge multiplier. And finally, one thing I did get last time, 3, humans have the versatile heritage. With these 3 things, I'm going to have to very carefully figure out how to combine these together for any of the character combinations that include 2 or more of these things. Very quickly though, let's get some vocabulary straight. General feats are a fairly large group of, well, feats. Skill feats are just a subset of those. Out of the 29 we were talking about for versatile heritage last time, 18 of them are skill feats and 11 are not. For the sake of simplicity, for this whole next section, when I refer to general feats, assume I'm talking specifically about those. For reasons I'll get into more later, I wrote a program to help me with some of today's calculations, and as an unintentional side effect, this program can also tell me the average intelligence scores of various groups of characters with pretty minimal tweaking. Since we're dealing a lot in how many skills and therefore skill feats a character might be able to choose from, I went ahead and asked it what the average intelligence score is of humans, since we were only assuming intelligence of 10 before. The answer we get is roughly 14, so I can give every character 2 more skills than before. Hey, computer, just out of curiosity, can you give me some of the other interesting stats around that, like min and max and stuff? Fair enough. In hindsight, I'm not really sure what I was expecting on that. But anyway, with our newfound knowledge, we can increase the number of skill feats a character will on average be able to access. An average of 7 skills, rounding down again, and an average of 3 skills per skill gives us 21 skill feats, plus 4 others that have negligible prereqs. Great, 25 skill feats, and now we'll... Oh no. Computer, can you tell me the average intelligence scores of just human rogues? Okay, fine. So, before we were just looking at this number, but now we also need to separately look at this number for all those crazy rogue combinations we're going to be running into here. So, with that, 33 skill feats for the rogues and 25 skill feats for everyone else. Which, I mean, okay, since the program I wrote was able to help with rogues, that means it can easily give me more accurate information on how many skill feats the rest of the classes could access. So, I guess we're doing that. Alright, so having the program spit out the results of all the classes wasn't so bad, and the results we get are that, on average, alchemists and wizards will end up with an intelligence score of 16, while everyone else will end up with an intelligence score of 12. Let's use the bard as an example of what ends up happening in this process. We know that the bard is going to get 6 skill trainings, then another from their intelligence and another from their background. Before, we would have just said, okay, that's 8 times 3, then plus 4 for the skill feats that don't have a prereq we care about, and that would be the end of it. But we know more information now that we can work with. We know that bards are specifically always going to be trained in occultism, which opens 5 skill feats, and performance, which opens 3. So there's 8 skill feat options, then we do the normal average multiplication for the other 6. Then add the 4 again, and we are not actually done. There are 3 skill feats that have a prereq of the character needing to be trained in either Arcana, Nature, Occultism, or Religion. These are Quick Identification, Recognize Spell, and Trick Magic Item. That means that we can add 3 more to these options, since all bards will be trained in Occultism. I then did this process for every single class, and after all of that, it does indeed raise the non-rogue skill feat average to 28. So, we did it! We're more accurate! Yay! Now, given all of that, let's consider the worst case scenario for combinations as an example of the shenanigans I'm talking about here. Let's say we have a versatile human rogue who took the general training ancestry feat. This means that we need to consider 3 different cases when a general feat is chosen for the first 2 choices, when it's 1 general feat and 1 skill feat, and when it's all skill feats. It's all 3 of these cases put together that make up the total number of possible combinations for just this character down to the ancestry feat. Except, hang on, we have an 11th hour correction. I also missed that this general feat exists. You're fully immersed in another ancestry's culture and traditions. Whether born into them, earned through rite of passage, or bonded through a deep friendship or romance, choose a common ancestry. You can select ancestry feats from the ancestry you chose in addition to your character's own ancestry, as long as the ancestry feats don't require any physiological feature that you lack as determined by your GM. Alright, from the human perspective then, for adopted ancestry here, the only ancestry feat I'm going to drop from this is ancestral longevity, since good luck having a level 1 human adventurer who's 100 years old. Your GM may say no to more, I'm just keeping it as general as possible. Since that leaves 35 choices for adopted ancestry, that means that this table turns into that table. This number's going to be so big. Why, Peso? Why do you do this to me? Think of the math! No. Wait. Hang on. Specifically, don't think of the math. Just keep making things that sound fun for a player to take. And keep being your awesome selves. I appreciate you. But also my math! And now, with all of that skill talk, there are still 2 more things that I will have to keep track of behind the scenes here. 1. Humans have the skilled heritage, giving them an extra skill training. And 2. Humans also have the natural skill feat, giving them 2 more skill trainings. Because of how much more accurately we're trying to track how many skill feat options a character has, I am now tracking both of these things in my math. And after all of that, here is the table we end up with. Seems a lot less complicated than you'd think, right? Well, that's because the real table looks like this, and hell no am I trying to display all of that in this video. If you want to check out the full sheet, check out the link in the description, and please feel free to review my work at this point also. For everyone else, here's what we end up with. Humans with general training end up with just 10 times more than we originally had at the beginning at 38 million. The humans with natural ambition are going to come in at 2.7 million. Natural skill are going to have 1.8. And finally, our old friend adapted cantrip. Remember when it was just that and there was no other complications? That was nice. And they're at 250,000. Then finally, all the other humans that I didn't have to specifically kind of pick apart are another 6 million, giving us, just for the humans alone, 49.8 million. So we throw that back into here, and our new total, along with all the other ancestries, is 54 million. Folks, we were at 3.5 million at this point in the last video. These numbers are so big. They're so big. As a quick side note, now that we've reached the end of what the number looks like after accounting for the feat choices, when I'd originally done this math, I thought it was 10 times bigger than this, and I reached out to Reddit to double check me. It was late, I'd been doing this for 4 days straight, and I just couldn't believe I'd done it correctly, and got no responses, which, fair enough, I suppose. Most people may have trouble being convinced that analyzing a spreadsheet is a great way to spend a Saturday night. It might just be me and Matt Parker on that. Either way, when I looked at it again after taking a break and sleeping, I realized I just had the number of digits wrong, and that was literally it. This is why it's important to take breaks, folks. Up next, we have the alignments, deities, and domains. Thankfully, this table isn't changing yet, so I can more or less tack these onto my previous work. Speeding through this a bit more, we get those numbers for the various humans, resulting in a total of 4 billion for the humans alone, and 4.5 billion for everyone combined. After the alignments and deities, we have given almost 2/3 of humanity a unique character. We've gone up by over 14 times our previous number at this point. What is even happening anymore? But we haven't done the whole planet yet, so we're still going to be doing ability scores. With the ability scores, there are going to be 4 major corrections to go over. The first is the human ability scores. You choose 2 different boosts, and that's it. I initially said this was 6 times 5, but remember what we said about combinations before. This is wrong. The order of the boost doesn't matter, so this is actually 6 choose 2, which comes out to 15. The second is that I misunderstood the rogue subclasses and thought that the key ability score change that they offered was required, but I realized after I made the last video that they're not. This means that there are really 5 possible states for the rogue's choice of subclass and ability score boost, not 3. And finally, one of the biggest mistakes I made in the last video, the 4 free ability score boosts all characters get. I completely dropped the ball on this, so we're going to correct it. Coincidentally, 6 choose 4 also works out to 15. Before we get to those free boosts, let's look at the numbers without that. We are now at a whopping 900 billion, with humans accounting for 97.7% of all possible combinations. And it is here that we're going to keep in mind our 4th correction before continuing. So quick recap. A character's ability score boosts are going to come from 4 sources: their ancestry, background, class, and the 4 free boosts. Let's say that you go through this and end up with a character that has this ability score array. The trouble that we now have is maybe that 12 dex came from the ancestry and the 12 wisdom came from one of the 4 free boosts, or they might have come from the other way around. With the current way we're doing this counting, we are counting both of these outcomes as unique because we're not doing the math with all of those 4 systems communicating with each other very well. Unfortunately, I couldn't figure out how to remove these duplicates just using the combinatorics math. So this is what I initially wrote the program for. I gave it all the information on the possible lists of ancestries, backgrounds, classes, and how the ability scores work, and it manually counted for any given combination of those 3 things how many of the resulting ability score arrays for those characters ended up being duplicates. These are the results, with an average of about 71% across all characters. One nice thing about this outcome is that it doesn't matter that I haven't implemented the other character choices yet. The min and max are set in stone. The only thing that implementing more of the choices would do is pull the average one way or another. To prove that, I did go ahead and also implement the heritages and subclasses, and sure enough, the min and max are the same, with the average being what really shifts. Given our knowledge that the humans are such an overwhelming majority of the combinations, I'm also pulling out what these numbers are just for the humans, and it's really this average that we'll largely be using. Now that we know that we'll be decreasing this number by 70%, let's multiply by 15 from the 4 free boosts and see what we get. And it is 13.6 trillion. Just wow. But alright, let's look at what our true range is after removing the duplicates. We're looking at extremely high confidence that the real number of possible combinations is somewhere between 2.6 trillion and 4.7 trillion. With our weighted average between the humans and the non-humans of 72.59%, our average and closest estimate to the real number of total character combinations up to this point is 3.7 trillion. We are so far beyond Earth at this point that this is 12 times the number of stars in our galaxy. If you really want to keep it to Earth, this is enough to give every single person on the planet roughly 482 unique characters. And with that, we have done it. All comments and corrections addressed, my sanity tested, and all without leaving the core rulebook. We have found 3.7 trillion unique characters for people to play. Thank you all so much for watching, and in the next video I will be covering how this number grows once we account for all of the books that also came out in 2019.